Welcome to the Devil's Advocate Show. Friends proving it's never personal, only politics.
Please allow me to introduce myself.
Here is your host, Mike Crute.
Welcome to the Devil's Advocate Radio Show. Dominic here in the Shaw. And it is Joe Biden Tuesday up in the 414.
I thought it was Funny Willis Day, man.
It's Funny Willis Day all across America. It's pretty bad when we are here in Waukesha, in the 414, in the greater Milwaukee Metro, in deference to the fact that I was at a Joe Biden rally a couple hours ago.
Nice, man.
The president of the United States, he was at Injateam, and that's sort of immediately adjacent to the back of American Family Field's parking lot. So I parked over at American Family Field, and I walked the gear over, and I met news director Terry Bell, and I saw Brady there. Often does the social medias here for Civic Media, and we did the speechifying. You know, we had the preliminaries, the local dignitaries. I got to tell you, Dom, when the president comes to town, all the Democrats,
everybody comes out of the woodwork.
They shine so bright. But it's pretty bad when the president in town is not even the lead story, man. I don't know what's got me more excited, the fact that I just came from Joe Biden or the fact that Donald Trump may die in a Georgia prison. Maybe.
I mean, you know, innocent until proven guilty and all that. The presumption
Have
of
you
innocent.
Heard the audio tape? Lordy, we've played that thing 100 times on this radio
All I'm
program.
looking for is 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have. Something like that?
Yes.
Something like that. Yeah,
Something like that. So anyways, Joe Biden Day in the 414. And Dom, the after hours indictment, you know, really by all rights, yesterday should have been Funny Willis Day.
Funny Willis night. I mean, they kept him late, man. The grand jury coming in late.
You know, I was cleaning up after dinner. I cooked the victuals last night, the Crudy household. Nobody seated at the table except my wife kind of came in. I don't even know why I bother. I bring home the bacon, I cook it up in a pan, and nobody eats it.
I like bacon.
They
Bring
turn
me
up their
bacon.
nose. But in the middle of cleaning up the kitchen, I just looked at my wife and I said, Trump's been indicted. And she's like, again?
Again?
I mean, the guy's 4 times indicted now, Dom.
91 felony charges? Is that right?
If you added them all up. But this one's got some other participating, let's call them co-conspirators, co-indictees. What's co-defendants? What is the term for Rudy Giuliani and Mark Meadows and John Eastman?
Yes.
And Kenneth Chesebro.
And there's like 30 mentioned unindicted co-conspirators.
And, you know, one caught my attention.
Talking about 19 people actually got charged, right, this time in Fulton County. Criminally, and 30 others unindicted co-conspirators. Well,
Dom, there was a co-conspirator that is referenced by name in the indictments in the Fulton County. And you know, I'm thinking, where do I know this guy from? Oh, yeah, he used to work just on the hallway from us. He used to fill in quite frequently on the Righty Whitey talk radio down at Heartless Radio. In fact, he still does. Brian Schimming. Not only is he a star of Righty Whitey talk radio stage and screen, he's also the Republican Party chair of the great state of Wisconsin. Now, he wasn't at the time of this alleged criminality, Dom, and he was not specifically indicted. But, you know, they had a little press missive today in that Joe Biden's in town. Want to trash talk Joe Biden just a little bit, except the chairman of the party's not taking any questions. Well, that's not true. They allowed written submissions. And according to the journalist, there were many questions about his
role,
let's just say.
His being mentioned prominently. Okay, not prominently. The name Schimming comes up 2 times, Crudy, in Funny Willis's indictment.
Well, that's something for his Wikipedia page.
Don't tell Bradley. You see Bradley's Wikipedia page is getting re-edited.
Oh, yeah, I did see that. I bet I bet at
Bad
least
Bradley. Let's be clear.
the bad Bradley.
Yes.
Let's not get the people off in the weeds, Dom. Let's stick with the Republican Party chair.
Yes. There's so much. There's so much.
Was just righty-whitey talk radio fill-in host Brian Schimming. Now, he had been vice chair of the party, and he'd been a prominent. Hell, he was a Scott Walker cabinet member.
Here's the point to yeah.
Well, Dom, let's turn to the reporting at the Journal-Sentinel. This one, I told you, I really like Brian Schimming right up until the January 6th. And then he went and wrecked it. I saw this guy at the Wisconsin Broadcasters over the course of the spring. I saw this guy probably 3-4 months ago. He comes over and says hi.
Well, yeah, man. We were colleagues in radio for a long time in Madison.
Took a selfie. I said, "You son of a bitch. I used to like you." I don't think he knew exactly what I meant, but I did. I knew he was probably subject to criminal indictment, or be at least being named as a co-conspirator in an indictment of the former president, Rudy Giuliani, and many more. Dom, Wisconsin GOP Chairman Brian Schimming referenced in Georgia indictment of Trump. Now, I was wondering if he was indicted. Like, I was wondering. I looked up. I had to Google him specifically. Like, is this the day that Brian Schimming gets indicted? The Georgia grand jury indictment of former President Donald Trump and his allies also outlines interactions with Republican Party of Wisconsin Chairman Brian Schimming, alleging the communications and meetings amounted to, and here's a quote, Tom, from the indictment, an overt act in the furtherance of a conspiracy. That makes them co-conspirators, right?
Kind of sounds like it, yeah.
To steal votes and defraud voters.
Well, if you can't win, then you may as well try to steal them and defraud them after you've already tried to suppress them.
Well, a little more setup before we read the specific citation from the indictment. The Georgia indictment accuses Trump and his allies of of a conspiracy to steal electoral votes from Joe Biden after the 2020 election, and the state the Democratic candidate narrowly won on his way to winning the presidency. Dom, I bet it was by like 11,781 votes, something like that. It's close. Here from the indictment, on or about the 12th day of December 2020, Kenneth John Cheesebro met with Brian Schimming and discussed the December 14th, 2020 meeting of Trump presidential elector nominees in Wisconsin. Rudolph William Louis Giuliani, that's Rudy, right, joined the meeting by telephone and stated that the media should not be notified of the December 14th, 2020 meeting of Trump presidential elector nominees in Wisconsin. These were overt acts in furtherance of the conspiracy. Do you get what they're saying here? The mere conversation was a crime, and they were taking specific steps, and they didn't want the media to know, at least not under the advice of Rudy Giuliani. Now, it is my understanding that Andrew Hitt did put out some sort of press missive. Nothing like putting out evidence of the crime.
Yeah.
I thought you were a lawyer, Andrew. You, then the chairman of the Republican Party, state of Wisconsin. You are still a lawyer until your potential disbarment.
Crudy, back to the reporting, Schimming, who was not party chairman at the time, allegedly communicated by email and met with Kenneth Cheesebro, a Trump ally who drafted a memo outlining a plan to draft slates of false, fraudulent, I would say, Republican electors for Trump in key swing states, including Wisconsin. That's according to the indictment and a testimony provided by former party chairman to the U.S. House investigators last year.
Because let's not forget, Andrew Hitt had to testify under subpoena, right? J6.
The memo was sent to Trump's Wisconsin attorney. What's his name, Crudy?
Is it Jim Trupis? I'm not even reading.
Jim
I'm just
Trupis.
guessing it's Jim Trupis.
And has been referred to as the Wisconsin memo in recent indictments of Trump. Schimming did not acknowledge multiple questions on a Tuesday media call about being referenced in the Georgia indictment. The Wisconsin party official himself is not among those indicted by the Georgia grand jury. In a statement sent later to reporters, the very brave Schimming said this: as stated previously, Republican electors met in accordance with state statutory guidelines on the advice of attorneys and with precedent to preserve all legal options still pending before the courts.
No options pending before the courts at that time.
Had the courts ruled differently, the alternate electors would have been needed.
the courts had already ruled before these false electors cast their ballots down. If you'll recall, the Wisconsin Supreme Court by a Hagedorn had already decided 4-3
that day, earlier that same day.
Earlier that same day. It was almost like breaking news at the moment they were committing these conspiracies. But the Wisconsin conspiracy is not what got Brian Schimming mentioned in the indictment in Fulton County, Georgia.
Right. But it was what, again, I think we should reiterate why was the current chair of the Wisconsin Republican Party. Why was he mentioned?
He was a consultant, Dom, wasn't he?
Cheesebro met with Schimming. Cheesebro, don't be a cheesebro, discussed the December 14th meeting with presidential electors in Wisconsin. Giuliani joined the meeting and stated the media should not be notified. They should not be notified of the December 14th, 2020 meeting of the Trump presidential elector nominees in Wisconsin. These were overt acts in furtherance of a conspiracy. The current Wisconsin Republican Party chair was engaged with others in the furtherance of a conspiracy. And let's not forget the last
conspiracy. That's what that is.
Let's not forget the last one, right? Hitt. Andrew Hitt was the last one, Crudy. And he had to testify. He did sign paperwork claiming to be an elector for Trump, was interviewed by the U.S. House Committee investigating the events that led up to the January 6th insurrection. And Schimming and Shimmies have said that they only agreed to go along with the plan because they were told the paperwork would only be used if a legal challenge overturned Trump's loss.
Now, Trump also had a statement he made. They could have brought this 2.5 years ago, yet they chose to do this for election interference reasons in the middle of President Trump's successful campaign.
What did Hitt say? These guys are up to no good and it's going to fail. Where do I sign?
Come back. More Devil's Advocates live from the Shaw, 5:40 a.m. Keep it locked right here.
I guess I just lost my husband. I don't know where he went. So I'm gonna drink my money. I'm not gonna pay his rent.
And we're back. Thank you for listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. Phone lines open for you today at 844-967-2789. Also, a timely guest, our friend James Santel, former U.S. attorney, host of Morning Cannolis right here on Saturdays 9 to 11 on the Civic and Media Network. He's going to join us at 5 o'clock to dive in to all the goodies from the Fulton County indictment.
Dominic, Pink blew him away last night in Milwaukee. How'd you miss a concert, dude?
Yeah, wasn't doing that, man.
Not a Pink guy.
I've seen Pink before. She's very entertaining, very talented lady. American Field, man, it was raining out. No, man, I was done. But I love some Pink.
You know, I didn't see any pink confetti or anything in the parking lot. I was there earlier today at the American Family Field. I mean, you talk about a big venue. She's playing a big venue. Yeah. Even Uncle Joe Biden didn't play American Family Field, man. Right, played a smaller venue, let's just say, down the road. Anya is producing us today. We're in Waukesha. Do we have some of the sound of the Joe Biden speech? We're looking for that. We're going to want to play some of that. And also, we're going to want to take some of your phone calls, react to the newest indictments. There are so many to keep up with of the former president. And also, Joe Biden gave a hell of a speech. Hopefully you listened to it on the Civic Media Network. Dom, you were conspicuous in your absence, though.
Yeah.
Where was Dom?
I got to get work done, man. I'm working over here.
So I did double duty. I was there for the both of us, Dom.
And what's your big takeaway, Michael?
Joe came to start a fight. Joe was picking some fights with the Republicans, specifically Ron Johnson. I mean, Ron's not even on the ballot. Ron already won re-election, sadly. And Mandela Barnes was there. And I did post a picture of Joe Biden on the rope line. And I mean, Joe wasn't leaving. And I had seen warnings last night after the Pink concert. The traffic was going to be a little bit of a pain in the ass last night. Yeah. That was my understanding. I had seen that on the local radio or heard it on the local Civic Media radio station, WAUK, last night. But what I didn't realize is Joe Biden. And Joe Biden, he is a man of the people. He was there working the rope line for longer than he spoke. I mean, seriously, the speech was supposed to be 18 minutes by his own admission. I'm supposed to give an 18-minute speech. I didn't time it out, but I would have guessed 35 with a lot of, I swear to God.
Right, of course.
I swear to God, my grandpappy did such and such at the such and such.
Yeah. Total Joe.
And then there were not even veiled swipes at Ron Johnson. Just went after the man, just going after Rojo. And I was thinking, I hope he's not wasting his energy. But you know who the preliminaries, the luminaries were? Well, we had quite a who's who assembled in Milwaukee today. We had Mayor Chevy Johnson. We had County Executive David Crowley. We had Gwen Moore, and you know Gwen Moore is always good to get a crowd more.
Oh yeah, she'll fire him up.
So Gwen Moore's like, I'm here to introduce Joe Biden. Only she wasn't. She was there to warm up the crowd. And then it got a little off track and it wasn't clear who was coming next. And so anyways, Tammy Baldwin came to the stage next. And then the firebrand that is the governor of the state of Wisconsin, Tony Evers. And he gave a very Tony Evers-like speech. And the one thing I will give the governor credit for today, he did not outshine Joe Biden.
All right. Never want to do that.
You know what I mean? They were very similar speaking styles, sort of mumbly, fumbly. Joe is.
Yeah, but Biden did not talk about euchre.
I'm not sure that Evers did today.
Oh, okay.
I was listening. I think we're playing it back for broadcast. I was monitoring. You know, I was there doing the job of two men, Dom.
It's hard, man.
Trying to provide coverage from the scene at Inja Team, which is a green energy manufacturing. And the reason Biden was in town was to sort of talk about the investment deal, the bipartisan, the Inflation Reduction Act. And Gwen Moore called it the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. I hadn't heard it described as such. I'm like, the IRA is only a year old?
What?
Like, I thought they'd been around for a while. Individual retirement accounts?
The Irish Republican Army?
I know. So eventually it sunk in. They were talking about this bipartisan investment deal in green energy and other things. That was the bipartisan one, right?
Yes, Republicans voted for it. Some did.
I think they did. And Joe,
and those that didn't will still take credit for it.
Joel
cash the check. Yeah.
And he said, I catch hell from some of these progressive liberal sorts because a lot of the investment, a lot of the states, there's more investment in red areas, in red states, because they need it. And Joe Biden was kind of honest about that. He said, I know it's not popular, but that's where the investment needs to go. We're the American people. What I text you during the course of his speech, one little 3-word burst.
No quit in America.
There's no quit in America. That was sort of Joe's attitude. And so anyways, all these fine local electeds, I saw Melissa Sargent there and Tammy Baldwin gave a little brief speech, like 2.5 minutes, really pretty quick. And then they started announcing the wrong people. And Tony Evers got like a curtain call, and now Governor Tony Evers. Well, Tony went up there with no prior introduction and he had already given his speech. So then Tony got up like he's at the ball game, like he just hit the home run to win it, right? Tony's like waving to the crowd. He's having a little fun with it.
Second time around, yep.
Yeah, curtain call, they called it, right? You get up to bat, you hit the home run. And there was one brief moment where Mandela Barnes, our friend, Mandela, he should be our center. But Mandela leaned in and, man hug. But I captured the moment from maybe 10, 20 yards away. And it looked like he was leaning in to give Joe a kiss. Like, I love you, man.
I love you too, man.
Here's what the people of Milwaukee probably didn't love. Because Joe failed to exit in a timely fashion, the eastbound 94 was dead stop for miles. I was coming back. I was driving back out to Waukesha, out here to the suburbs. I was going west.
You're right. You're going the right direction.
But you'd have thought they were playing a World Series game because all the traffic was stopped. They just had cones and sheriffs, and they had the traffic stop. And when I left, Joe was still kissing babies and shaking hands. Come back with us. That man loves humanity. So do we. We're the Devil's Advocates. You can be a part. 844-967-2789. A big Biden Tuesday edition.
The Devil's Advocates know how to kick ass and chew bubblegum, and we're all out of bubblegum.
Welcome back to the Devil's Advocates radio show. Midnight train to Georgia. It wasn't quite midnight, but the indictments did roll down on the former president yesterday. And, it's interesting that Scott Walker felt like he had to pipe up. You've got that, don't you?
Yes, I do have it. I did retweet.
Now, the former gubernator of the state of Wisconsin was the target of the John Doe investigation. And for those that are new fans to the show, we covered that for years because the guy was flouting campaign finance laws. He was breaking them with constancy. How do we know it? Because the Government Accountability Board had given him a specific directive, as they did to Mary Burke. And
yes, to all of them, yes.
You cannot coordinate with outside third-party group under Wisconsin law. And he did. With constancy. He was breaking the laws of the state of Wisconsin, and he was investigated by the gold standard, the former Government Accountability Board. So what the Republicans do, they got rid of the retired judges, the referees. Now we got a very partisan, piece of what
that the Republicans are also not happy with of their own creation.
Not like the people that serve on the Wisconsin Elections Commission. Our friend Mark Thompson, who does the Paul Revere show right here on Monday nights. Well, they're good people. Even the Republicans, Tom, I got to give some credit to. They're not out there claiming it was a rigged election or it was stolen from Trump, anything of that regard.
Most of them aren't. Some of them are.
But Scott Walker was breaking laws. And Scott Walker was at minimum creating what would have been tremendous civil forfeitures, like $100 million worth. Because of Wisconsin campaign finance laws, like a triple doubler. It's like a Kobe Bryant special. But he never got charged. And they got rid of the John Doe investigation of politicians. And they got rid of the Government Accountability Board. And for good measure, they changed the campaign finance laws, doubled the caps to the governor and other electeds, and said effectively it's the Wild West here in the state of Wisconsin. Corporations can give uncapped donations to the party, and then the party can turn around and give it back to a candidate. Ain't that swell? That was all under the tutelage of Scott Walker. And it made him a target of the John Doe investigation. And there were some other things he did, like a sweetheart real estate deal with a leasing agent on Big Blue in Milwaukee.
That was still when he was, county executive?
Yeah, there were some other things that happened.
Like a unreported Wi-Fi router in his county executive's office.
The secret router.
Yeah,
yes,
so people could, work on
set
county
up by
time.
Tim Russell, who utilized stolen funds from a charity established by Scott Walker and effectively took 20 grand or more, some for the solicitation of sexual favors and some for the creation of a Scott Walker for Governor website, which was funded with stolen dollars from a charity that Scott Walker created, which was staffed by a Scott Walker guy named Tim Russell, I think went to prison.
Yeah, that guy.
Scott Walker, he was above all reproach.
Oh, of course.
How could anyone want to investigate a guy like that?
Here's what Walker tweeted out 9 hours ago. Political motivated liberal DAs targeted me and my allies for years until a federal judge shut them down. So forgive me if I'm a bit cynical about another politically motivated liberal DA targeting President Trump.
The fact that your ass didn't, and I'm not saying these were Trump-like serious crimes. I think Trump's crimes far more serious than breaking campaign finance laws in the state of Wisconsin. But Scott Walker, you were a criminal. You were engaging in criminal acts. You were breaking the laws. And the fact that the laws have subsequently been changed for your benefit, your specific benefit, doesn't mean you weren't a criminal and broke the laws
at the time when
you were perpetrating criminal acts, I would allege. And I'm not an attorney, but I did read the piece in The Guardian because Scott Walker asked, man.
Right, I know.
This guy raised millions of dollars illegally. Millions. And coordinated with third-party groups. I mean, his own guy was like the head of the third-party group he wasn't supposed to be coordinating.
Right. He hired the third party. They worked together, and the guy had his own thing too. Yeah, it was the whole thing. And it's all out there, folks. You want to see it. But
Corrupt,
so Donald Trump gets indicted. Scott Walker pokes his head up and says, I was also targeted by politically motivated liberal DAs. But of course he wasn't. I mean, he was targeted because he was breaking the law. But if John Chisholm wanted to bury Scott Walker, he could have
done so in the recall.
Let known there was an investigation during the election.
All it would have taken, and we have heard so many times, it was John Chisholm, who is the Milwaukee County District Attorney. To this day, the people here continue to reelect the man. He never charged Scott Walker. I think he should have, but never charged Walker. And the accusations were all these investigations were started because, the DA's wife was a public school teacher.
And she was very sad about Act 10.
And this was all very, very political. And Chisholm was just trying to besmirch and smear Scott Walker. But of course, if you actually do the math, if you wanted to take out Scott Walker was up for a recall in the summer of 12, right? We started doing a little radio show that spring. And I can tell you, if you wanted to take out Scott Walker, just the act of charging him, he would have been politically dead. He could not have survived.
Back then. This was back then. This is at different times now where, charging someone actually gets you more donations. But back then, Republicans and independents.
Scott Walker's little cult of personality, they would have been reacting in the very same way that the Donald Trump MAGA cultists do. I mean, they protected that guy. They still swear by that guy. They think he's super cool.
He's so cool.
What do you say again? Like, poor me. How do you make
Scott
this
Walker,
about him?
Political motivated liberal DAs targeted me and my allies for years until a federal judge shut them down. So forgive me if I'm a bit cynical about another politically motivated liberal DA targeting President Trump.
Let me put it to you this way, Dom. If I saw that some talk radio host, some political talk radio host, I draw some modest analogy between them and I. We've got some parallels. We do the same job. If they were criminally indicted, I would be running to Twitter to compare myself with them. Who does that? Who says, I was also, flirting with all forms of criminality and, they were investigating me and therefore I'm skeptical. Who brings attention to the fact that they were a target of a John Doe investigation and probably should have been criminally charged and convicted? I mean, I wouldn't.
I mean, Scott Walker, but he craved, he misses the limelight, man. He was a big shot governor, but he's making way more money now.
You know why he's sucking up, of course, because he needs Trump at the debate next week.
Yes.
Trump will not be at the.
What? Say that again?
I only say it to antagonize Scott Walker. I think there's still a chance he could be at the debate next week.
There's always a chance. Michael.
Trump claims he's putting on a big press conference
Monday,
Bedminster.
Yes. Big
he's
press
got evidence that will exonerate him.
Yes.
So he claims.
It's like OJ. OJ's looking for the real killer, man. He's going to come out with a book that says, "If I did it," I can't wait to see, man. I'd have got away with it too if it weren't for your damn meddling kids.
I thought that was the working title of Scott Walker's book, Unintimidated. If I did it. 844-967-2789. Oh, by the way, I told you, Joe Biden came to town to start a fight. We've got a little bit of sound of Joe, and we've been playing some during the news break, so you'll get your dose of Joe Biden. But here's a little troll of U.S. Senator Ron Johnson. As I said, Ron's not even on the ballot this year, but he's still catching hell from the president
his
own district.
As well, he should. He continues to embarrass not just the state of Wisconsin and the Senate, but the country. What did Joe have to say? Anya, if you would, please. Yes.
There were like 3 different incidents. We'll just play you one.
All right, let's hear
it. Named Ron Johnson.
Yeah.
Ron Johnson on Social Security and Medicare, quote, "We should transfer everything. So we have to consider everything every year."
Senator Johnson.
So he called him out at least 3 different times. At least 3 different times. He did not mention
We're wanting
Trump
to bring what Medicare, Medicaid, all that up for budgetary conversations every single year.
Everything from that to climate change to there was some other incident, some Ron had done, and I wasn't even aware. But I believe Joe Biden. I bet his staff, prepped him. Hey, did you see what crazy Ron Johnson from Wisconsin
that's
did?
not hard. Just do an internet search.
We're going to Milwaukee on Tuesday. Let's talk about that. So I'll see if any of the local news coverage references that specific. But Joe kind of fires up. Here's what I hate about the president. As a communicator, he does the whisper thing. And that makes it like you're leaning in right now. You're like, talk louder, Crudy, right? And it's like a speech device where you speak quietly and
you bring them in, you draw them in more, and then
my wife's a quiet talker. Except when she's mad as hell at me. And then, you can hear every word, right? So then Joe gets you leaning in, and then he's like, he bellows, then he's loud. And I'm like, who's riding the gain on the little portable? Joe's
You're making me work, Joe. Come on,
Joe was making me work the whole time. I got little beads of sweat. I was working so hard riding that gain on Joe.
Turning the knob. I get it. 844-967-2789. Crudy, the story
just
here.
Just as Anya.
She knows.
It's hard work.
It is.
It's hard work, sister.
We're getting texts about how easy my job is. All I'm going to say is it's more than knobs, you guys. Come on. That's a different kind of job.
Here's the reporting at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel.
Present company excluded. Them.
Of course. On multiple occasions during his remarks, Biden took aim at Wisconsin Republican U.S. Senator Ron Johnson, whom he accused of supporting outsourcing manufacturing jobs. Johnson in 2020 advocated for shipping some jobs overseas, describing the ability to outsource manufacturing jobs as one of the benefits of a global economy. I mean, Oshkosh Truck in Oshkosh, his own district. I mean, come on, man, he's from Oshkosh, Wisconsin. He was like, no, give the post office trucks to some out-of-state company. We don't want those here. We don't need that here. But here's what President Joe Biden said. Between the year 2000 and the year 2021, Wisconsin alone lost more than 136,000 manufacturing jobs. In 20 years, Crudy. I'd like to see Senator Ron Johnson talk to those 136,000 people and tell them it doesn't matter whether you manufacture things at home or overseas.
Wasn't that crazy?
That sure as hell does, man. Sure as hell does, Crudy.
Joe is a little salty. But isn't that a crazy thing? I had not heard that Ron Johnson had effectively said, let the poor people manufacture. We don't need Americans doing all that labor, turning knobs and such.
Well, it's less expensive for the manufacturer, right? And then you can either pass those savings along, or more likely,
keep them
for yourself.
Oh, I like that idea.
See,
that makes me richer.
Profits. Yeah, see, it's very simple.
So, what Ron would imply is the next time I'm at a Joe Biden event and Joe's talking trash about Ron Johnson, I got to ride the gain. Perhaps I should bring a immigrant laborer along, Ron, a third world laborer, because there's billions of them.
That's pretty much Ron's thinking.
Well, at least you know that Ron sees himself as a little more equal than some others.
But of course, that we have, constituents in the state of Wisconsin, that have lost, as President Biden pointed out, 136,000 manufacturing jobs in 20 years. That starts adding up to every year, man, right? You're a little bit more every year, a little more every year, a little more every year, a little less money, coming into the state, a little less payroll taxes, a little less sales taxes where people spending that money, buying things, investing things, a little bit less for that. But apparently it's all fine because there's a little bit more for the stockholders.
I don't know how that could be, Dom, since Scott Walker was the governor like more than a decade ago. We've had a manufacturing and agricultural tax credit where manufacturers in the state of Wisconsin pay a 0.4% tax rate. That's a sweet as hell deal if you can get it. But we haven't seen any sort of overwhelming growth in the manufacturing sector.
Come on, man. Foxconn, baby. The eighth wonder of the world. Oh, wait. Green Bay Press Gazette today reporting that not only did Foxconn close their Eau Claire Center earlier this month, they are now also closing, or at least putting up for sale, the Green Bay office building, the Innovation Centers.
Does that mean they're not moving forward with the fish farm, Dom? Come back with us. We are the Devil's Advocates. You can be a part. 844-967-2789.
The Devil's Advocates. Never personal, only politics.
And welcome back to the Devil's Advocates radio show. Join us on the lines, 844-967-2789. James Santel, former U.S. attorney, going to join us in the happy hour, so we look forward to that. I mentioned Foxconn. A little Dropkick Murphy's going out to Scott Walker. Scott Walker brought us Foxconn.
They literally hate him.
And the reporting today at the Green Bay Press-Gazette, Foxconn Technology Group has listed for sale a downtown Green Bay riverfront high-rise 5 years after its intended use did not materialize. I mean, I got to tell you, are you shocked? I am shocked. Shocked, I tell you. Gambling here? The 6-story Watermark building, 115 Pine Street on the shore of the Fox River, is for sale for $9.75 million, according to LoopNet.
We're on the Fox River in downtown Green Bay, Dom, with the WGBW studios. You can hear us there now on 97.9 FM, 1590 AM.
Well, how long is the lease, man? We got a nice property for sale.
Oh,
here.
we got a nice spot, though. We're not moving.
Foxconn bought the property in 2018 as part of a plan to develop innovation across Wisconsin. It envisioned up to 200 workers in the Green Bay facility. Woo, up to 200 workers, man. How did that vision work out? In a statement provided to the Green Bay Press-Gazette, Foxconn Technology Group confirmed it wants to sell the building in order to focus on its Mount Pleasant operations.
And what do they do in Mount Pleasant?
With ongoing business activities taking place within Foxconn's Science and Technology Park in Mount Pleasant.
What activities are taking place?
Business activities, Crudy.
The activities of business.
Yes. We anticipate successful transaction of the Watermark property will add vibrancy to Green Bay's downtown community. Currently, 3 of the 6 floors are in use, yada, yada, yada. Again, the other piece here. Foxconn's Eau Claire Innovation Center space, a 15,000 plus square foot portion of the Haymarket Landing building, also went up for sale for $2.7 million August 8th, according to LoopNet. Just a little more. Jeff Merckx, executive director of Downtown Green Bay, Inc., said Foxconn officials notified him the company intended to put the property up for sale, a decision Merckx said was mutually beneficial for the company and community.
Good riddance.
It's evident their intention many years ago was to utilize it, but we fully recognize business plans change.
Their intent was to stroke Scott Walker's ego, get big cash incentives, and stiff the state of Wisconsin. And Scott Walker was either too dumb or didn't want to know the truth, Dom. Because he thought it was the ceiling of his reelective campaign.
Well, what was his 200,000 jobs promise, right? That he never, ever met.
Remember when Trump came to town, 8th wonder of the world, him and Scott Walker and Reince Priebus out there digging a hole? They ever do anything in that hole except throw money in it?
Well, yes, apparently they do business. A little bit more from Merckx here, from the director of the Green Bay, Downtown Green Bay, Inc. It's evident their intention many years ago was to utilize it, but we fully recognize business plans change. They want to focus on their main lines of business and give an opportunity to a developer to advance this property. I see it as an outstanding opportunity for downtown Green Bay. Yes, Foxconn wants to focus on their main lines of business, Crudy. Which is what? Ongoing business activities taking place within the Foxconn Science and Technology Park. It's business. Crudy, don't worry your pretty little self about it.
Primary business activity is the solicitation of tax credits from the state of Wisconsin. I mean, thank goodness Tony Evers has done a bit of a renegotiation, right? That was a bad deal. Oh, Dom, we've got one other story update because Foxconn. Have we ever had a good update on Foxconn ever?
Well, yeah, they're selling a couple of the buildings.
Oh, yeah.
And they're hopefully leaving soon.
Bah, Felicia. That's the best Foxconn news we can hope for at this late hour, Dom. But yesterday we talked about Rebecca Bradley, air quotes, Justice Rebecca Bad Bradley.
The Bad Bradley, yes.
The Bad Bradley,
yes.
Just for clarification.
Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice.
Well, apparently she had been doing a little self-improvement on her Wikipedia page. And since that news was brought to light, on Dan Bice's Page 6 report.
Way
And
to go,
later,
Dan.
here on the Devil's Advocates radio show, apparently, Dom, lots of people have taken interest in her Wikipedia page. You're welcome, Rebecca. On Monday, the Journal Sentinel reported that Bradley had been quietly editing the details of her personal page on the online encyclopedia to remove information critical of the experienced jurist. Bradley acknowledged she was making the changes, blaming the media for distorting her judicial record. Blaming guys like us now. We distort not.
Is that what we do? We're distorters?
I refuse to let false accusations go unchecked, Bradley said in an email. On my Wikipedia page, I added excerpts from my actual opinions and removed dishonest information about my background. And within hours of that story posting and coverage here on the Devil's Advocates radio show, Tom, some say greatest radio show ever.
That's true.
Dozens of Wikipedia users made numerous edits to her bio, reversing some of her changes and, let's just say, updating other information.
Updating. Yes, updating.
There were so many changes, in fact, that Wikipedia has partially locked the page from further editing. Does that mean she's not going to be able to go back and re-change it, Tom? Among other things, someone noticed that Bradley earlier this year had deleted references to her homophobic writings while a student at Marquette University. Those articles came to light during her 2016 Supreme Court race against former appeals court judge Joanne Kloppenberg. Now some of the quotes are back on Bradley's Wikipedia page. Be careful what you wish for. Lots of people might go editing. Here's a quote. In the columns written under her maiden name, Rebecca Grazel, she wrote, "One will be better off contracting AIDS than developing cancer because those afflicted with the politically correct disease will get all the funding. And how sad that the lives of degenerate drug addicts and queers are valued more than innocent lives of more prevalent ailments," she also wrote. But the homosexuals and drug addicts who do essentially kill themselves and others through their own behavior deservedly receive none of my sympathy. And you receive none of mine. Bad Bradley, Rebecca. In another article, Bradley compared abortion to a time in history when Jews were treated as non-human and tortured and murdered, and a time in history when blacks were treated as something less than human. All the quotes are heavily footnoted. Note Stan Bice at the end of his column. A little update, Dom.
A few more of these original ones from the archives over at the Journal Sentinel. Perhaps AIDS awareness should seek to educate us with their misdirected compassion for the degenerates who basically commit suicide through their behavior, but the homosexuals and drug addicts who do essentially kill themselves and others through their own behavior deservedly. None of my sympathy, as you mentioned. Heterosexual sex is very healthy in a loving marital relationship. Homosexual sex, however, kills. Homosexual sex kills. To those offended by my comments I made as a young college student, I apologize. I assure you that those comments are not reflective of my worldview. Those comments have nothing to do with who I am as a person or a jurist, and they have nothing to do with the issues facing the voters of this state. Yeah, pretty sure gay marriage has something to do with the voters of the state. Pretty sure, AIDS and disease has something to do with the voters of this state.
Dominic, there's one new entry. Here it is. In 2023, Rebecca Bradley confirmed to the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel that she edited her Wikipedia biography, removing and replacing content. Wikipedia told her of its interest guidelines advising against editing your own article. Come back. More Devil's Advocates. The Happier Happy Hour with James Santel.